Are people ruining the fun of video games? Hey guys, it's Alex O'Neill again for another edition of Alex Talks, where I kind of sit here in front of this weird box-like figure and talk about video games at you. And I'm not communicating with you at all. I'm just talking and you're listening, ideally in a video podcasty kind of form. So today I wanted to talk about cynicism and, cynicism in video games. It's a growing problem. If you write about games, then you probably already know where I'm going with this, and I'm sorry, just in advance. But it is a problem. So I just, for reference, to kind of work within a guideline, cynicism is defined by Google search as an inclination to believe that people are motivated purely by self-interest or skepticism. Which is part of what I'm getting at. You know, people become so cynical about video games that it's just, the idea is they're looking at it from the worst perspective. Like, for an example, when PlayStation Now was announced, if you listen to that episode of the Irrational Passions podcast, which I'll put in the description below, it was kind of like met with this reception of, well, I'm not going to be excited because it's obviously not going to work, because it's too ambitious, and two, there's not going to be anything on there. It's just going to be The Last of Us, Puppeteer, a few other AAA games that Sony's published, and that's it. Which is cynical in that you're just writing it off before it's even there, because you're assuming the worst. Because, for example, Sony has fucked up in the past. And I'm not limiting that just to Sony, but, with the PlayStation collapse, the PlayStation Network failure, we'll say. They've got a lot to prove. And something as ambitious as PlayStation Now it's a difficult thing to do. A streaming service for video games that doesn't suck, that doesn't cause input lag problems, is ambitious, and it's not a challenge to be met lightly. But people were really, or at least I was, in this scenario, I was more optimistic, and I was upset at all the cynicism out there of just like, this isn't going to work, so why get excited about it? And I am guilty of cynicism as well. I've been guilty of it on this show before. I don't know how many times I've said, well, we're just talking about video games, which are just big adult baby games, so why are you getting so upset about it? Which is more like just dark and negative than it is cynical, but it is an inherent problem when it comes to video games, because as soon as something happens or something that could be exciting happens, people just write it off because obviously it won't go as well as they want it to, or it's going to suck, or it just won't work. And it is a problem, especially people who write about games are very cynical. And I think it's justified. That's kind of the conundrum. That's why I fall somewhere in the middle. I don't know. I just did like my karate chop at you guys. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to pull out the moves on you, but I'm cynical in that I'm realistic, right? If something is a pipe dream, it's a pipe dream and it might not work. But I'm optimistic when it comes to things that I am genuinely excited about. Like, every time they announce a Zelda game, I'm excited. It doesn't matter if it's Hyrule Warriors or if it's A Link Between Worlds. I was excited, like, for example, when A Link Between Worlds was announced initially, when it was just The Legend of Zelda working title on the 3DS, I was super stoked. I was stoked from day one. It's like, it was a sequel to A Link to the Past, which is my favorite Zelda game. And it's top down. It's a 2D Zelda, which Nintendo hasn't made one in years. And it has a great style. I love the art style of A Link Between Worlds. I know a lot of people don't. But, a lot of people were upset about the announcement. A lot of people were like, oh, they're going to ruin A Link to the Past by either making a horrible sequel or just by depending on it too much. Or the art style looks stupid, the game's going to be shitty. Or it's like they're they're biting off more than they can chew, because a sequel to A Link to the Past is to uphold to this incredible standard of one of the best video games ever made, in my opinion, in a lot of people's opinion. So there's no way it could be anywhere near as good. They're already digging their own grave. And I was more in the camp of like, A Link to the Past was great. Nintendo knows what it's doing with Zelda, hopefully, sometimes. It's hit or miss, honestly. But Nintendo hasn't made a 2D Zelda in ages, and I think they still got it. And it came out and it was great. And if you read my review, there is a little bit of cynicism there, and like, I marked down, I didn't give it a 10, I gave it a 9. And it was mostly because, like, the game leans very heavily on the fact that it is a sequel to A Link to the Past. And I feel like the game would have been better if it was a wholly original world, without this idea of being a sequel. I thought if the dungeons weren't callbacks, if the map wasn't a callback, if the world that they were in wasn't a callback to A Link to the Past, it would have been a better game. And I firmly stand behind that, because it takes away from the creativity by having to lean on this crutch that is a game that it only half feels like a sequel to. It only feels like a sequel to A Link to the Past because it felt like they were forcing it. And I think that's a cynical point of view, but like I said, I'm guilty of it sometimes, and sometimes I'm not. And I know there are a lot of websites, entire indie games writing websites out there that are devoted to taking cynicism out of writing about games. And that's admirable. But, I guess the point I'm trying to work towards here is that cynicism is healthy. It's okay to be skeptical, if I could speak. It's okay to be skeptical about certain things, especially when it's a very large challenge to do something ambitious and different in an industry that relies exceptionally heavily on sequels and building on sequels and building on tech and whatnot from previous iterations. There are very rare cases when the huge list of games or the best-selling games from the past year weren't sequels or were new IPs or original ideas. Last of Us being a huge, huge outlier. But like GTA 5 is the fastest selling game of all time. Call of Duty, one of the most sequel-ridden franchises in games, is the biggest video game franchise. Just in sheer sales numbers and reception. It's just being cynical, I think, at least at this point, when it's a sequel-ridden industry with a lot of problems, like depending on annual franchises and depending on tons of sequels, and Nintendo remaking the same 3 franchises every 5 years for the past 15 years. Stuff like that is out there. And being skeptical and being pessimistic about it is an understandable perspective, but that shouldn't stop you from being excited and optimistic about things that could work or could be cool. Just food for thought, I guess. Like I said, fall somewhere in the middle, where if I see something that I'm very skeptical about, I'm going to meet it with that cynical perspective that you're bound to see all over the internet. But I like to give everything the benefit of the doubt. I like to at least try and be excited about some things. Like Persona, for example. I'll always be excited about Persona until they drive the franchise into the ground. But that's cynical. I don't want to be that.
It's a Twitter question.
Let's talk about some Twitter questions. I got a few here. I'm gonna make up for missing Alex Talks by answering a few questions. So one I got from Mr. Frank Emaster on Twitter. He asked me some things and then a real question of what's your favorite, or what are your tabletop games? My favorite tabletop game, I'm going to include kind of card games in this. My favorite is probably Cards Against Humanity. Huge proponent. We've done live streams of Cards Against Humanity on our Twitch channel. I love it. It's stupid. It's horribly offensive, like me and all of my friends. A new podcast that's going to come out on the site this week, you'll be able to hear, is me just being as crude and vulgar and offensive as possible. So look out for that soon. But, yeah, Cards Against Humanity, just right up my alley as far as what I like. But a traditional tabletop game that I've recently gotten into, Dungeons and Dragons, 4th edition. I love it. It's so much fun. And I've done a lot of dungeon mastering and a lot of running the character as well, and I love Dungeons and Dragons. I would play that every weekend if I could, if I had the time for it. I got another question from Brendan, who actually used to be on our writing team. He asked me, in a second question that he had for me, do you think Nintendo will reveal new hardware at E3? That's a tough question. There have been rumors everywhere about Nintendo talking about new hardware. I think it's kind of crazy to assume that they're going to just plop out new hardware. I think if they do reveal new hardware, I could see them doing a Wii U Slim or some kind of cheaper redesign with a bigger hard drive. I'll put my fingers up here so you can actually see them. A bigger hard drive, smaller design, cheaper cost. If it was a $250 100 gigabyte hard drive without the gamepad, yeah, that would be a smart move. Because if they're not even going to use that gamepad, if they're going to keep saying, hey, we're going to use the gamepad in interesting ways, we swear. If they're going to say that every single E3 or press release or every time they take a huge loss and then just not, and then make it a horn for Mario Kart 8, then they should make a bundle without that gamepad. And I understand some games need it, but at this point, half the games out there don't, or they just don't use it, and they should patch them to not need the gamepad, because they need to sell those systems, and a bigger hard drive and a cheaper price would do that. And the last one I got from a good friend, John, at Plankfan. He said he just got a Vita. He got a Vita Slim with Borderlands. He says, what games do you recommend that aren't Spelunky? Which is a good question. I know I do lean on Spelunky quite a bit. Spelunky is probably, it's not the best Vita game, but as far as pick up and play games go, Spelunky is up there. Spelunky's coming to PS4, by the way, just putting it out there. I'm stoked. Persona 4 Golden, obviously, in my opinion, the greatest game ever made. It is excellent and has a heartfelt story and incredible characters. Even if you're not a huge JRPG guy, I think you can get into it. I am not opposed to people setting that game to easy, blowing through all the dungeons in that game, and just playing it for the story. Because the story is super fun, and like the breakdown of like, how am I going to spend today? I'm going to hang out with Yukiko or something like that. Just having all those options and spending time with different characters and whatnot, I think is super. It's super inviting. It's definitely friendly to new people to JRPGs. It's unlike any JRPG out there. Also going to throw out Danganronpa. I don't know if you're into visual novels, but it's got a great story. Very smart, very well written game. I talked about it on a previous Alex Talks. Very clever. A lot of fun to play. It's a visual novel, so it can be tedious to people who aren't used to that kind of game. But to put it out there, it's also a lot of fun. SteamWorld Dig is only $10 and it's cross-buy with PS4 and PlayStation 3 as well as Vita. And it's super addictive in like a really weird way. Like the game is only 3 to 4 hours long, but it's really easy to pick up and play. It's super gratifying. It's like a loot game without any monsters, really, without any loot. It's like you just go into a mine, dig holes, get gems, and then sell them, and then upgrade your dude. It's really weirdly addictive. I don't know why I like the game so much, but I really do. And I've heard good things about Killzone on Vita. It's a first-person shooter on a handheld. Take that with what you will. Obviously all the free PlayStation Plus stuff. And hook that Vita up to your PS4 and play like Infamous or Assassin's Creed on your Vita. It's actually like really fun. I know Plankfan has a PS4, which maybe not everyone who has a Vita does, but like Infamous and Assassin's Creed are perfect for it. Any game that runs at 30 frames per second is really good with the remote play, but 60 FPS games, I wouldn't recommend it. It feels weird. It doesn't look right. Stuff like Resogun and whatnot just doesn't really look right on the Vita screen because it can only stream to the Vita at 30 frames per second. But Infamous is awesome if you do that on remote play. So I hope that helps. There's also a ton of other games out there that you can play on Vita. I don't have a lot of Vita games, I'll be honest. I bought it mostly for Persona 4. But I play Spelunky on it like every day still, and Persona is worth the price. And plus playing PSP games on that thing is really fun. And any PlayStation 1, PS1 classics you had are good on that as well. But yeah, that's all I got. If you have any questions for me or topic ideas or anything, just tweet them at me at AlFighter27 and I will get back to you. I'll let you know if I'll do it on the show or something. Go to irrationalpassions.com and check out all the cool stuff that goes up there. Latest episode of the podcast goes up today on Tuesdays. We record every Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern. So check that out if you want to watch us live and ask us questions while we record. Another thing I'm going to put out there, we are open to new writers. If you are interested in joining the Irrational Passions writing team, getting some experience working with me, working with the other writers that we have there, it's volunteer, it's not paid. The maximum, or the minimum, I should say, articles you need to write is 1 per week. And it's preferred if you know how to use WordPress and use Google Docs or Google Drive. But yeah, if you are interested in writing for the site, let me know. Alex@irrationalpassions.com is my email. Just say like, hey, I'm interested. What do you need me to do? And I will get back to you as soon as I can. So there you go. Thanks for watching, guys. Alex Talks goes up every Tuesday and Friday. So until Friday, I will talk to you guys later.